Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Reparations Nation, where we discuss news topics and how that relates to reparations for foundational black Americans, descendants of American slavery. And with that being said, folks, look at what we have here from the New York Post. Squad lawmaker explains creative way to pay 14 trillion in slavery reparations, moral and legal obligation. So let's get into that and see what they're talking about here. Let's scroll down a little bit, folks. Let's just get on here and scroll down a little bit. See what they're talking about right here. Let's see here, folks. Let's see. All right. Oh, and the date of this was that's important as well, too, folks. My apologies on that. Let's see. This was published January 18th, 2024. So almost, well, just almost a week ago, a little over a week ago. Let's see what we got going on here. A New York lawmaker wants the federal government to push 14 trillion reparations measure. That's a good number, folks. It's a little low. Okay, let's be honest on that. It's a little bit on the low side. And that debt clock keeps on counting. Let's remember that. I mean, as long as we don't have it, the clock keeps on counting. So let's go on with that. But yeah, we'll go with 14 trillion. That's a decent number. The measure is touted by squad member Representative Jamal Bowman. He's a Democrat out of New York. He wants the federal government to be held accountable for slavery and the aftermath of it, according to the Journal News. Now, here's my thing with that. Yes, the federal government does owe us $14 trillion, but as you've heard many other people speak on it before, you got Jason Black, Professor Black Truth, Kid Gravity, Torian Rain, Lisa Cabrera, all the people. Even what's my man, Philip Scott. Even Philip Scott talks about it. With that being said, there are more people than just should say more entities than just the federal government that owes us. You got to start talking about the banking system, the stock market itself. Okay, we were the first traded commodities on the stock market. Slaves were enslaved black Americans. All right. Who else? The churches owe us. The private institutions such as Harvard, Yale, all those folks owe us. I mean, it's real deep, folks. It's real deep. And truthfully, all the immigrants that came over after when they started saying, "Give us your poor, you're hungry, you're destitute," and all that stuff, they owe us too. And let's be honest about that. They owe us because they came to this land by choice. And they came to this land by choice because we had already built it up. And they came to enjoy the fruits of our labor, which we were never compensated for. All right, so Bowman cited the federal government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the space race endeavor as examples that would make the measure feasible. And you know who said it wasn't feasible? What's his face? The guy that ran for president when he was running on the socialist platform. God, I can't think of his name now. Why can't I think of his name? But y'all, Bernie Sanders. That's it. Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders says it's not feasible. It's not feasible. It's not feasible. And so did every other person running for president, Congress, Senate, any lawmaker. They all said it wasn't feasible. But how is that so when you just gave out $9 trillion for COVID? Just gave it to everybody. Just cut the checks and it came to our bank accounts directly and we were good to go. So we know you got the money, people. We know you got the money. And once you add all those other people I just talked about, they got the money. It's quite feasible. Let's see. He said, when COVID was destroying us, we invested in American people in a way that kept the economy afloat, says Bowman. The government can invest the same way in reparations without raising taxes on anyone. Now, first of all, as I said, there do need to be some. I didn't say this, but yeah, you can raise taxes on certain peoples, and foundational Black Americans wouldn't pay taxes anymore, just flat out. That should be part of it as well, because again, all these people that are here that are not that were swear they weren't former slave owners or have ancestors that weren't slave owners or didn't come over here to get the fruits of our labor, enjoy the fruits of our labor. Yeah, they definitely owe us too. because you came over here and built your country, built your family on our backs. That's what you did. I don't want to hear nothing about poor farmers and anything like that, because if you're not for reparations, you are white supremacists. That's just how it goes. That's just how it goes. Because what does it hurt you to give us reparations? If you don't give us reparations, it keeps the status quo as it is. Reparations is to repair and to pay a debt owed to us. It's to repair a loss. We lost everything. You're talking about children that were born that didn't live to the age of 1 sometimes, and once they got past that, most of them weren't living to the ripe old age of 40, 50. All enslaved black Americans were not these Aunt Jemimas and Mammies and Uncle Bens in the house. They averaged about 20 years, 40 tops, and that's pushing it. Okay, so let's not play about that. Y'all owe us for that. Let's see. Where did the money come from? Bowman said. We spent it into existence. That's probably very true. Probably very true. Let's see here. Bowman is among 9 sponsors of HR 414, not HR 40, which was a commission that they were going to study reparations and if we need it. So this time they're trying to push it. Now the Dems know this is the middle of well, not the middle, but the beginning of campaign season. Come on now. We've been asking y'all for this for years, telling y'all to pay us these old reparations. So y'all gonna sit around and try it now? And the Biden administration ain't even doing it. Like, come on, Biden. You gonna have your little boy do it? No, son. Come on, buddy. We are more hip to that. We are more hip to that. Again, so non-sponsors of HR 414, which seeks to establish that the U.S. has a moral and legal obligation to provide reparations for the enslavement of Africans and its lasting harm on the lives of millions of black people in the United States. The measure introduced in 2023 would prompt the federal government to spend $14 trillion on a reparations program that would support the descendants of enslaved black people and people of African descent. Now, here is where I have an issue with that. Those of African descent, that's every black person on the planet. That can include a white African. I mean, white people in South Africa are called Afrikaans. They are technically Africans, and when they come to America, they're technically African Americans, which is why we delineate ourselves and call ourselves foundational black American descendants of American slavery. It's lineage based. Reparations needs to be lineage based. Let's stop playing with that, because anyone can jump on the bandwagon then. Now he says blacks make up 12% of the population of the U.S. according to census figures. It's been 12% since like the 40s, okay, the 50s. Let's stop playing games. I'm pretty sure there's way more than us than that. The issue is we need to find out how many of us are foundational black Americans and not from the islands and things of that nature, not from Canada, not from Europe, Africa, etc., etc. Reparations should be lineage based and foundational black American descendants of slaves only at this point. Anyone else looking for reparations needs to look to the colonizers that colonized them, i.e. Caribbean. Y'all need to look to England. And truly, we need to look to England too, as well. Spain, all those countries, they owe us as well. But strictly stating, any Caribbean people, Jamaicans, Haitians, whoever colonized y'all, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, England, y'all need to be looking to them for that, okay? No, because y'all came to America by choice. You didn't come to your island by choice, but you definitely came to America by choice. And that was already built up by us. So the reparations go to us. Yeah, those figures are pretty low in my opinion. We're going to look that up at some point. Reportedly, the bill comes 3 decades after another bill that sought to assemble a federal commission to study reparations. I believe I already discussed that. That's like HR 40 they're talking about. And we don't need no one to discuss that. Let's keep it real. Let's see here. Let's go on down. That is Bowman there, looking like a black preacher, a very hefty black preacher from the pulpit. Pulpit pimps, we call them sometimes. Not saying all preachers are pulpit pimps, but a great many of them are, and he does look the type. Let's see. A measure to, all these ads, I'm sorry. The measure to establish a federal commission on the impact of reparations was reintroduced this year, and Bowman is a sponsor of it. That's H.R. 40. The measure could address concerns over perceived racial disparities in housing. There's nothing perceived. There is racial disparity in housing, mass incarceration, and education outcomes. And as the bill states, eliminate the racial wealth gap that currently exists between black and white Americans. So here's the thing, y'all. We know there's nothing perceived about this. We know there's a racial disparity in housing. Most black people do in America, most foundational black Americans do not own a home. And it has nothing to do with the economy or, them being young or millennials or anything like that. Most old black people do not own a home. It's just simply as that. There's tons of us who are out here still renting, as far as that goes. Or had to sell the home to get money to live in the nursing home, things of that nature. Mass incarceration, we already know that black folks are the most highly incarcerated people on the planet in America. We make up most of the prison system in America. That being said, we know when black codes came out, that's how we started with that. As soon as Reconstruction was over and we started having quote unquote rights, which we still didn't have any, we were just quote unquote free, the black codes came out. Loitering, not having a job. Who was hiring black folks back then? Wasn't nobody employing us unless you went back to the same slave master that owned you and sharecropped for him, and we know how that turned out because black folks ain't never had nothing with that. They owed more than they ever had, and by the time they died, they still owed the slave master most of that land, which means all of that land. Like, we can Google that. That's nothing hard to look up. Loitering, I can stand outside on my front porch and be called for loitering at that time. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's real deep. Bowman added that the incarcerated should be able to vote. I don't really care about that. That's not a big issue to me. First of all, they shouldn't have been incarcerated no way, and you can throw that in there. But the fact that they are incarcerated or come out on parole or probation, either or, if they're a foundational black American, put that money on their books, okay, in the story. And if they're free, cut that check for them. It just is what it is. As far as them being able to vote, if that's in there, fine. I think they should, but I don't think that's a big major issue. Because black people control the Democratic vote anyway. We control pretty much all the votes on the Democratic side, which again is why they're trying to bring in all these illegals to replace us. Notice how they kicked the Haitians out, but the Supreme Court just yesterday, 2 days ago, said to cut them wires down in Texas, which they didn't. So there's that. But the government wants them to come in to replace us, so they can not have to use us for the vote at all times. But I digress. That'll be in another video. Let's see. And I definitely think that when they come out, they should automatically be enfranchised. Yes, of course. Like I said, they should get the check, cut the check for them, even when they're in the prison system. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. So let me scroll down a bit more. Let's see. To put a price tag in perspective, the federal government spent about $7 trillion in 2020. Some numbers say $9 trillion, like I said earlier. About 28% of the nation's $25 trillion economy, the Journal News reported. Bowman believes that $14 trillion could be distributed over decades, and here is another problem I have with Bowman. Decades. One decade is 10 years. We all know that, right? So 14 trillion. He says that. Who says that 14 trillion needs to be paid out in one shot? Foundational Black Americans, me, you. Who wants this over time? You can be calling J.G. Wentworth to get your cash now, or something like that. Like let's calm down with that. That's tomfoolery. That's real life tomfoolery. Over decades, nah, son. This nigga tripping. It might be possible for it to be paid out over 5 or 10 or 20 years. 20 years? You could take that $330,000 check and break it up into monthly checks over X amount of time. There are creative ways to do the right thing and do what needs to be done. Sir, creative ways? There were no creative ways for slaves. We had to make creative ways to survive out there, okay? They didn't think about making our lives easier. They just wanted to get that money, and they got it out of our blood, sweat, tears, and bodies. Murders, rapes, forced work, dropping dead from heat stroke. I'm from Atlanta, y'all, and Georgia is hot as hell. I've lived in New Orleans, Louisiana for 6 years. It's hot as hell there. Okay, folks was dropping like flies. Let's stop playing, and they got their money. Cut the check right now. Over 10 years, sir. That's $33,000 a year. Folks, and y'all gonna want to try to tax it, so it shouldn't be taxed. Number one. Number two, who says folks gonna live that long? You might not live 10 years. Okay? Come on now. And if it's 20 years, that's $15,000 a year. That's below the poverty line. I'm sure a lot of people would love a $15,000 check, but what if they don't live the 20 years to get all 330,000? That is absolute foolishness, this man is saying. Sir, we reject this bill. I speak, I'm sure, for all foundational black Americans that are on code, and we all know what on code B1 means. B1 is black first. On code means that every group every group of people has a code they must follow to be successful. We reject this bill because this will not make us successful. This will not in any way, shape, or form bridge that wealth gap between black Americans, foundational black Americans and white Americans. Not even close. The average white American has $125,000 to their name. The average white American. The average black American, we know it's closer to like $8,000. You can look up the numbers, do the math yourself. Again, we'll go over that stuff in another video. But Google it, it's out there. Don't trust me, trust trust Google. Trust Google. That's funny. Anyway, y'all, you can check it out for yourself. But 5, 10, 20 years, nah, dog. It's the next president, Democrat or Republican, but it will probably be Democrat, because if you want our vote, you're going to cut this check. Otherwise, we ain't voting for you, dog. It just ain't happening. Not even close, player. That being said, it needs to be within 4 years. Your first term, sir and or ma'am. Your first term. We put you in office because you say you're going to get us reparations, $14 trillion for foundational black Americans only. We can work out other stuff for other people later, but it's not for the poor. It's not for the immigrant. It is for foundational black American descendants of slaves. If your family came from the killing fields of the South, or those shores or houses up north, those your descendants, you get that check. Cut it. So yeah, these years ain't gonna work. It needs to be the first year, first term of that presidency. $333,000 divided by 4. That sounds good. Okay, that sounds good. And it shouldn't even be 4. It should be as soon as you get in office, you sign that bill, you cut that check. I want $330,000 in a year, 2 at best. Okay. Now, the bill cites scholars estimates that the U.S. benefited from over 222 trillion hours of forced labor between 1619. That's just when the first so-called boat docked and was written down. There were first of all, there were black people here before that already. Whiter people, Europeans, weren't the only ones that had boats and traveled the seas. Let's stop playing. Again, we were already here. And plenty of us were taken from the shores of Africa. Okay, it's estimated 20 million were taken, and half of them died from the trek from the middle of Africa to the coast. Okay, and then another third of them died on the Middle Passage, being packed into ships and shipped over here. And then, of course, the dying and raping and all that stuff continued to happen, and the murdering and so on and so forth. So let's stop playing games with that, folks. All right, we really got to stop that. Let's see here. So yeah, 222 trillion hours of forced labor between 1869 and the end of slavery in 1619 and 1865, which would be valued at $97 trillion today. That's quite a large number there. Quite a large number. Okay? Quite a large number. And if you had $97 trillion of labor, why are they only talking about $14 trillion for us? Okay? Because again, remember, folks, we're talking about the whole of the United States, the entire whole of the United States. It's not just the federal government. Again, as I stated before, it's the churches, it's the banking system, it's the stock market, it's every little insidious part of this country. That anything that's been built in this country was built by us, generally speaking, through slave labor. Okay? Not immigrant labor of any type. People like to tell you the Chinese built the railroads. No, they just were in San Francisco and California connecting a few lines here and there. Every other railroad was built by slaves, enslaved black Americans, foundational black Americans. So cut that out. All right? And as I stated before in previous videos, the Native Americans got their reparations, okay? So they got their land, they got their casinos, whatever their elders decide to do with it, their leaders decide to do with it, that's on them. Let them figure that out. Ain't got nothing to do with us. The Japanese got theirs as well from being in internment camps. We all know the Jews got theirs. If you move to Germany right now, guess what you're going to have to pay? Taxes that go to the Jews. And that's fine because you moved to that country and that's their law, therefore you have to pay it. So you other people that came here to this country that are not foundational black Americans, immigrants of any type, and people who are people who are members of a family that formerly owned slaves, y'all got to pay some money too. Everyone owes us, and everyone knows that, and that is the problem. That is one of the bigger problems here. Well, my family didn't own slaves, but you benefited from it, shouty. You benefited from it. All right, let's stop playing games. No one told you to come here. You brought yourself over here by choice. By choice. No one forced you. So you got to cut that check too, buddy. Stop playing. All right, Bowman says there were 246 years of free labor that produced trillions or hundreds of trillions of dollars for the U.S. economy, says Bowman. First of all, those are the only quote-unquote accounted years. It was way before 1619. All right, way before. The economy wouldn't exist in the way that it does today if slavery hadn't been built on it. Of course. Again, we were the first publicly traded item on the stock market. Slave bonds. Are y'all kidding me? Stop playing. Y'all better do a history lesson in here. Let's see. The bill does not have any sponsors in the Senate. Well, of course it doesn't. Because no one in the Senate wants to empower black people, foundational black Americans. But this is about black empowerment. Once you change the wealth gap and give us the money that you owe us, that makes us even. That makes you not have power over us anymore. That makes it so that the police can't murder us in the streets anymore because we have a financial backing now. We can buy the court systems, okay? We can buy the cops, we can buy the feds, we can buy the judges, we can buy the lawyers, we can buy the Senate, the Congress, the presidency, like everyone else does. And when I say everyone else, I truly mean white supremacy and white supremacy adjacent people as well. They buy it. Why do you think they put an anti-Asian hate crime bill up, but don't have an anti-black hate crime bill? And we are 100% the most persecuted people in this country. Okay, let's stop playing it. Let's stop playing. Absolutely the most persecuted people in the country. That being said, where's our bill? But the Asians got one. Ain't nobody persecuting Asians. It sure wasn't us. It surely wasn't us. Asians are doing quite well in the United States. So yeah, that's why they don't want to have it sponsored in the Senate. Now let's see. Bowman's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. This is the latest attempt to push reparations on the federal level. Similar efforts are underway across the country in blue states, including San Francisco. Yeah, Gavin Newsom said that in San Francisco that every black person should get $5 million, a job that is guaranteed at $97,000 a year, so basically $100,000. Shouldn't pay taxes, and they pay $1 for homes. The funny thing about that is that's basically the Homestead Act. If you take out the $5 million, that's basically the Homestead Act. Martin Luther King talked about that. There were millions of acres of land given away to immigrants, white immigrants, to gird up their loins, and they were given land grant colleges to teach them how to farm the land. They were given equipment to farm the land. I mean, they gave it away. And what did we get? We were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule, and we got nothing, nothing, nothing. In the civil rights era, we got immigration. We got integration. But what does that give us? That has not benefited us one thing. We had black people, foundational black Americans owned more when there was no integration. Think about that. We had more black owned hotels, we had more black owned bus lines, we had more black owned taxi cabs, we had more black people owning homes. Like it just was a fact, you know? And then integration happened and we wanted to move into the suburbs with the white folks and they ran out, and then gentrification happened, which is just ethnic cleansing. And then they came back and bought all the houses up again after they let them get run down, not by us, but by lack of resources, because they took all the resources with them. Not enough tax dollars to put things there, build things, and that's what happens. Redlining and so on and so forth. So truly, with that being said, I mean, this bill is trash. Bowman, we as foundational black Americans, we reject that bill, man. That is absolute garbage. Absolute garbage. Okay? Yeah, we reject that bill. What black people, foundational black Americans, descendants of American slaves want is A, cash reparations. Should be $350,000 to $1 million a head. Because we saw that $97 trillion and 222 trillion hours of labor. It should be up to $1 million. But we'll take 350. That's not a horrible number. Okay? I know some rich black millionaires that could trick that off easily, but $350,000 to the average foundational black American, that's a house. Okay? In certain states, in certain cities in America. That's a full-on house. Or a very healthy down payment on one where your mortgage will be like $32.67, $137 a month or something like that. And I'm just throwing random numbers out there being silly, y'all, but you get the point. Like, come on, man. $350,000, you could start banks with that. It's just so much we could do with that, all right? And that would immediately close the wealth gap. We don't want it over no period of years. Cut the check like you did in COVID, son. Y'all tripping. Cut that check. So $350,000 that first year, we want that. Okay? We want an anti-black hate crime bill because we the only ones getting discriminated against like that. We the only ones getting murdered in the streets by the cops like that, whether we had a gun or not, whether we resisted arrest or not. And we all know that most of the times ain't none of us resisting arrest from those race soldiers. Police are simply slave catchers. Y'all know that, right? You know that the origins of policing came from slave catchers, slave patrols. If you don't, look it up. Look it up. I'm spitting game to you people. Look it up. And that's all they doing now. And I'm sorry, black cops, y'all need to quit that. Quit the force, bruh. You just a self-hating coon on that one. I'm sorry. You're not doing anything. You're not helping your streets. Okay. You're not benefiting your community. You're not doing anything to help us. You're in fact working with the savages, the beast, the devil. You're working for white supremacy. How does that make you feel? Well, we know how it makes you feel because you put that badge on proudly every day with that uniform. Strap your guns on and your stun rays and your laser lights and all that stuff. Come on. It's not a good look for you, bro. Sis, cut it out. So the third thing we want is for the police to be punished. Okay? In qualified immunity. You ain't got to defund them, but you damn sure got to end qualified immunity and get them out of our neighborhoods. Okay? We don't need cops patrolling our kids. We just don't need it. All right? We can control our own kids. We can protect ourselves. There's a Second Amendment. Black folks can buy guns and protect themselves. Okay? We don't need y'all. Who are you going to call when the bad guys come? Nigga, nobody. Myself. I'm going to call on God to give me strength to squeeze this trigger and stop the threat to my life and my family's life. That's what I'm doing. Call the cops to pick up the pieces later. But that's it, player. That's 100% it. So, yeah, we don't need them. What police officers should be doing is detective work. Finding all these missing black young girls and boys. That's what they should be doing. Stopping sex trafficking. Okay? That's what they should be doing. Okay? We don't need them in our streets patrolling, stopping, frisking us and stuff like that. That's just downright deplorable. That's a violation of my Fourth Amendment, sir. My body is my home. My body is my house. My pockets are mine. You can't touch my pockets. Get out my pocket. Come on now. So yeah, to reiterate, we need $350,000 for foundational Black American descendants of American slaves the first year in office, maybe the second, and you might can divide that in two, but really cut that $350,000 check, player. That's number one. All right. Number two. Oh, and we ain't paying no taxes on it. Ain't no taxes being paid on that thing, shawty. You can guarantee that. All right. That's number one. And 1A, I guess. Number two. All right. Anti-black hate crime bill. Keep these race soldiers off our backs. Keep these heathens off our backs. Keep these savage racists off our backs. Keep these white supremacists off our backs. Because there's only one real form of racism, and that's anti-black white supremacy. Anyone else that practices that is practicing anti-black white supremacy. All right? No one is killing gay blacks because they're gay. They killing you because you black. You being gay is just the icing on the cake, shawty. They don't give a damn about that. So it's not about LGBT rights. No, they don't need no extra money. No, immigrants don't need no extra money. They give immigrants let's say $30 million in New York spent already. Chicago for all these immigrants. Kids getting kicked out of schools. Y'all spending money on them. Y'all can spend the money on us, man. Cut the check, bruh. All right. And then thirdly, again, go ahead and end that qualified immunity. Punish these race soldiers. Punish these so-called slave catchers. Those are only three things we need, and black folks will thrive. Okay? Thrive. And for my cousins in the Caribbean, other parts of the diaspora, I implore you, get your money from England, get your money from Spain, get your money from Portugal. Okay? Get them checks. We're going to call on the church too. We calling out Harvard. We calling out everybody. We coming for them checks. All right? As Dr. Martin Luther King said in one of his very last speeches, when we come to Washington this time, we're coming for our check.